3, dulcimer. Here we have six specific instruments. So we have another 6 here in this whole mess. Cornet 1, flute 2, harp 3, sackbut 4, psaltery 5, dulcimer 6, and all kinds of music. Ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. So here is the commandment, here is the expectation. When you hear that music, you'll fall down and you'll worship that image. You might say when Antichrist comes riding in with his theme music, not that there'll be literal music, but when he comes riding in on his white horse claiming to be Christ, again, as you'll find in Revelation in that first seal, the first seal is you have someone on a white horse with a bow, which is not it's an imitation. Whether you want to call it a bow as in a bow and arrow, or whether you want to call it the Shekinah glory, the rainbow that surrounds God's throne, the big thing is that first seal, that rider on that white horse, isn't Jesus Christ, although he claims to be, and he deceives people into believing he's Jesus Christ. It's Satan. And so it is that when he shows up, he's going to, of course, ask people, demand people, expect people to worship both him and his system that he saves or breathes life into after it receives that deadly wound. Again, that deadly wound, a lot of people speculate on that and argue or debate and wonder what that is. And certainly we'll find out once we get there as well. Verse 6, and whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And again, that hour, you can equate that with the hour of temptation, which is when Antichrist is here, which is during the tribulation. And once again, Satan, of course, will not be casting people into a burning fiery furnace, but what he will be doing, if you've ever read Ephesians chapter 6, he will be hurling fiery darts at people to try to, well, I mean, you might say to try to consume them spiritually, and certainly to try to get them to jump in ultimately into the lake of fire with him. That's why it's so important in Ephesians chapter 6 that you do have that gospel armor on, which is simply arming yourself, preparing yourself, and taking in this word of God as your protection and as your covering, and your faith in God as your protection and your covering. Verse 7, therefore at that time when all the people heard the sound of the cornet 1, flute 2, harp 3, sackbut 4, psaltery 5, and all kinds of music. We lose the dulcimer as named here. But again, of course, there were 6 specific kinds of music, or 6 instruments named. All the people, the nations, and the languages, the entire world at that time, as known, fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And so it will be that during the tribulation, again, the entire world basically will fall down and worship Antichrist, and worship that system and take part in that system. Because, again, not to belabor the point, but it does bear repeating, I suppose, he'll come claiming to be Christ, appearing as Christ in the physical sense, and doing miracles, being allowed to do miracles, not necessarily exactly the same as Christ, but doing miracles that someone would say only God could do something like that. And certainly at that time, even the atheist, who maybe have mocked you, those of you who are Christian, and have doubted you, and have argued with you, and disagreed with you, they'll be in a big-time, happy little spiritual, so-called Christian tent revival. And they may come up to you, or they may see you and say, oh, I'm sorry, you were so right. There is a God, there is Jesus Christ is real, and he's here. Isn't it wonderful? And you might say, if they say that to you, just kind of say, yeah, it's something, isn't it? And move on. Because there's a specific time, those of you who will be delivered up, there's a specific time that will occur, and not until that particular time. You don't want to be taken or delivered up before that, in other words. But verse 8, wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. So here we have these Chaldeans who no doubt were in that crowd from chapter 2, the sorcerers, Chaldeans, astrologers, and magicians who were asked to interpret Nebuchadnezzar's dream, of course could not interpret the dream, and even had a death sentence put upon them because of that Daniel, with God's help, with God's interpretation, pulled him away from that death sentence, as well as pulling him and Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael away from the death sentence. But these people, no doubt, were jealous because Shadrach, Mesach, and Abednego, again, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, were promoted, were given authority in the kingdom when they were captive Jews. These were you probably had some Kenites, some children of Satan, of the devil, mixed in with these Chaldeans. But jealousy reared its ugly head here, without a doubt. Verse 9, they spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. And you'll find that this is how they operate. They like to butter people up. And so does Satan as far as that goes. He'll butter people up. He'll butter you up. He'll try to put you on an ego trip like he went on. He'll compliment you. But every time that he compliments you, he'll be shaking your hand and patting you on the back and trying to pull the rug right out from underneath you. So be very, very careful. But understand that this is how his children and his servants operate. They will be very flattering, but they'll appear as harmless as doves. Again, from the book of Revelation, as harmless as women, but they have teeth like lions to rip and tear apart, spiritually speaking. Verse 10, thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer. Here we have the dulcimer again, 6 types. And all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. In other words, reminding him of the commandment of the decree that he had made. Verse 11, and whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Verse 12, there are certain Jews. Here comes the delivered up part. And again, this is your type. There will be people who say, even your own family, that unfortunately would be deceived, would say, well, you know Jesus, because they'll obviously think that he's Jesus. I have a son, or I have a daughter, or I have a parent, or I have a sibling, or a niece, nephew, aunt, uncle, cousin, what have you. They're a good person. They really are, and they're Christian, and they love God, and they love you, but they, for some reason, they don't think that you're Jesus, and they think that you're a fake, and they're not worshiping you, and I'd like to see if you can help them out, and that'll be basically how one is delivered up. But anyway, there are certain Jews whom thou, verse 12 again, whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. Again, no doubt jealous. Shadrach, Mesach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, plural, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Well, what a bunch of troublemakers, huh? These 3, Shadrach, Mesach, and Abednego, what a bunch of no-good-nicks they are. No, they're following God. They followed God. They knew his law. They knew not to have another God before him. They knew not to worship a graven image. And so they were fine. And obviously we know, and we'll find out, that they would come out more than fine when it's all said and done, even going through a tough time, if you will, or a threatening or challenging set of circumstances. But anyway, here the cat's out of the bag, and here they're turned in. Verse 13, then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Mesach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. So here they put Nebuchadnezzar on his ego trip. They reminded him of what he had ordered, what he had commanded, and they said, these three aren't regarding you. They're not regarding your gods, O king. They're not worshiping your image. And so they got him all fired up here. Now he's going to try to give these three a chance, because he no doubt did respect them, and he did respect Daniel. I don't know about love, perhaps, but he did respect Daniel, and these other three as well, and these three who were connected and friends with Daniel. Verse 14, Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, is it true, O Shadrach, Mesach, and Abednego, do not ye serve my gods, plural, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? So, in other words, he calms down a bit, and he says, he gives them a chance to speak, to defend themselves, or to explain themselves, and a wise king in that sense, not just, although he did become enraged, but wanting to hear their side of things. And again, Nebuchadnezzar, no doubt, was an intelligent man. Verse 15, now, if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, again, 6 instruments, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I have made, well. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? So in other words, he says, you're here now. If you're ready to comply, if you're ready to fall down and worship that image and bow down to it, then that's all well and good. But if you're not willing to do that, then you're going to be thrown into the fiery furnace. And again, he even challenges God, saying, what God can deliver you from me? And this will be, you can go to book of Isaiah, you can go to, Second Kings and Second Chronicles, where you have the general or the servant of the Assyrian army who basically standing outside the wall of Jerusalem, or excuse me, not Jerusalem, but outside the wall. Yeah, I believe it was Jerusalem. But standing outside the wall saying, all of these other nations and their gods could not protect them. What makes you think your God can protect you from me or from the Assyrian? And obviously, at that particular time in history, God did protect them from the Assyrian. And God will protect and God will deliver Shadrach, Mesach, and Abednego from Nebuchadnezzar. And at the same time, God will protect and God will deliver you from Satan, from Antichrist, who will have that same attitude, that there won't be anybody who can deliver you from his hands. But of course God can. And this third chapter and what happens here should be of great encouragement to you and to build up your faith for that time and even before that time, to build up your faith in God. Verse 16. Shadrach, Mesach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. In other words, they're saying, we don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. We don't even really necessarily have to give you an answer. We will, but it's not anything that we really have to spend a lot of time debating over or wringing our hands over. They were very clear-minded and very direct and to the point, as we're going to find out. verse 17. And actually, let me back up here, just because I think